The winter sea stretched in every direction, a cold horizon of blue steel beneath a sky the color of faded ashes. Wind pressed against the longship's carved bow, making its wooden frame groan under the weight of the voyage. The crew moved with practiced precision, silent, focused, determined to outrun the storm they could feel forming behind them. At the center of the deck stood their leader, Arvid Eriksson, a towering presence whose calm authority was carved as deeply into him as the runes etched on the ship's mast. Arvid rarely spoke unless necessary, but as men trusted the quiet way, he studied the waves, reading danger long before it appeared. His shoulders carried both the burden of command and the remnants of a past he never discussed, an unspoken sorrow tucked behind a hardness in his eyes. To most, he seemed carved from winter itself, steady, unmoving, unreachable. Yet beneath that icy composure lived protectiveness he guarded fiercely. As the wind sharpened, a scout near the bow raised an uncertain voice. "Jarl, something in the water." Arvid stepped forward. The ocean rolled in heaving swells, and between them, a shape drifted, small, fragile, and disturbingly still. "Bring us closer," he ordered. No one questioned him. The longship angled toward the object, oars digging through the water. When the waves lifted it higher, the crew finally understood. It was a woman. Her hair, dark, tangled, heavy with seawater, floated around her like a shadowed halo. Her clothes were torn, clinging to a body that looked too exhausted to fight the cold any longer. She lay limp in a half-splintered wooden frame that might once have been a small boat. The sea rocked her with indifferent hands. Arvid's jaw tightened. "Pull her aboard," he said. Two men leaned over the side, gripping the remains of the wreck. The woman's hand slipped beneath the surface, disappearing for a moment that sent a ripple of unease through Arvid's chest. The sensation surprised him. He was not a man who startled easily, nor one who let strangers disturb the walls he kept around himself. Yet something about her stillness felt wrong, as though she were drifting not just on the ocean, but on the edge of something final. When the crew lifted her from the water and laid her onto the deck, the sound of her weak breathing filled the silence. She was alive, barely. Arvid knelt beside her. Her skin felt cold enough to sting his fingers. A faint shiver passed through her, almost invisible. "She needs warmth immediately," one of the men said. "She will have it," Arvid replied. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Fire was forbidden on open waters. Everyone knew the risk. A single spark could doom a ship. But Vikings were not without methods, and Arvid had spent years mastering every way a person could survive the unforgiving northern seas. "Bring the furs," he said, "and the heated stones." Several men hurried below deck to fetch the carefully wrapped river stones that had been warmed before departure and kept insulated to hold their heat. It was one of the quiet survival techniques Arvid relied on, small sources of warmth that carried no flame. As they prepared them, Arvid studied the woman's features. She appeared close to his age, perhaps younger, with delicately shaped brows and a face that might have been serene had it not been etched with exhaustion. There were faint marks on her wrists, nothing sharp or alarming, but enough to suggest she did not come to the sea by choice. Her breathing trembled, as if her body fought to remember how to stay alive. Arvid felt something shift inside him. Concern? Responsibility? He wasn't certain, but he could not look away. When the men returned, they placed the warm stones near her body and covered her with thick furs. The crew gathered in a loose circle, curious but cautious. "Who is she?" one of them asked. Arvid shook his head. "We do not know yet. Let her wake first. Keep the ship steady." The longship resumed its careful path, slicing through the half-frozen waves. Snow began to drift from the sky, soft flakes melting against the woman's skin. Arvid brushed them away without thinking, a small gesture that drew surprised looks from his crew. He ignored them. Minutes passed. Then a soft sound rose from her throat, a faint, breathless gasp. Her eyelids fluttered. When they opened, Arvid expected confusion, fear, or even panic. Instead, her gaze settled on him with quiet, dazed clarity, as if she had seen him long before he found her. She tried to speak, but the words dissolved into a weak exhale. "You're safe now," Arvid told her, his voice lower than usual. "Rest. Your strength will return." Her lips barely moved. "Where am I?" "On my ship," he said. The storm drove us from the coast. We found you in the water. What happened? The question was gentle, but something in her expression shifted. Pain flickering across her eyes so quickly it could have been imagined. She closed her eyes again. I don't remember. Arvid did not believe her, though there was no accusation in his tone. Then rest. You will speak when you are ready. One of the crew stepped closer. Jarl, if she brings danger, then danger will find me prepared. Arvid interrupted. See to your tasks. The crew hesitated, then dispersed. Only Arvid remained beside her. The ship rocked steadily, the cold air biting at every exposed surface, yet the space around them felt oddly warmer. The woman's breath grew steadier, though her body still trembled under the furs. She watched Arvid for a moment longer, her gaze softening with a strange mix of gratitude and uncertainty. What is your name? She whispered. Arvid, he replied. And yours? A long silence followed. Finally, she murmured, Lisa. The name settled between them like a quiet promise, simple, delicate, and carrying the weight of a story not yet told. Arvid nodded. Rest now, Lisa. The sea has taken enough from you today. Her eyes drifted shut. Trusting sleep, she had likely fought for hours. Arvid stayed where he was, guarding her with a vigilance even he didn't fully understand. Above them, the sky darkened as the first distant thunder rolled across the horizon. The storm was coming, and so was everything Lisa had yet to reveal. Night settled over the long ship with a quiet that felt far too fragile for the storm lurking beyond the horizon. The sea darkened to a shade so deep it nearly swallowed the ship's silhouette, leaving only the muted glow of the moon shimmering across the water. Most of the crew retreated to their assigned posts or found a corner to rest, but Arvid remained awake, standing near the mast like a sentry carved from the ice-covered prow itself. He kept his gaze on the woman sleeping under the furs. Lisa's breathing had steadied, but the faint pinch between her brows revealed her body was still at war with the cold she had endured for too long. Every now and then, her fingers curled slightly, as if reaching for something or someone no longer within reach. Arvid's chest tightened at the sight. It was an unfamiliar ache, unwelcome yet impossible to ignore. He had rescued countless people in his years on the sea, injured fishermen, stranded travelers, even enemies who had abandoned their own pride in favor of survival. But none of them had stirred anything in him beyond duty. With Lisa, that distance felt strangely fragile. The sky rumbled. The storm was drawing closer. He turned to one of his men, a younger crew member named Ren who stood nearby polishing his spear. Check the lashings. The waves will rise soon. Ren nodded, but his gaze drifted toward Lisa. Do you trust her, Jarl? Arvid didn't answer immediately. Trust was a luxury he offered carefully, and Lisa was a stranger with secrets. She had not yet spoken, but the memory of her near-lifeless body in the water gnawed at him. Whatever trouble she carried, it had nearly taken her life. She is our responsibility now, he finally said. That is enough. Aren lowered his head. As you say. The wind intensified, sending a cold spray across the deck. Lisa stirred under furs, her eyes opening slowly as reality crept back into her awareness. She blinked up at the moonlit sky before her gaze found Arvid. The shadows softened around her features. Is it night already? Her voice was quiet, barely touching the air. Yes, Arvid replied. You slept for several hours. Your body needed it. She attempted to sit, but her muscles trembled with effort. Arvid moved instinctively, steadying her before she could fall back. Easy, he murmured. Lisa hesitated, the proximity sending a faint flush across her cheeks. Something changed in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or a sense of fragile safety she didn't fully trust yet. My apologies, she whispered. I didn't mean to trouble you. You are not trouble, Arvid said, surprising himself at the words. The wind quieted for a moment, as if listening. Lisa looked down at the furs around her. I remember the cold, and the water, but before that, everything is blurred. Arvid watched her closely. He did not miss the way her hand drifted to her wrist, touching the faint marks there as if they were memories etched into her skin. Her expression tightened before she forced it into neutrality. "You do not have to speak of it before you are ready," he said gently. "But know this, no one will harm you here." Her eyes lifted, searching his face for proof. It was as if she needed to hear the truth in his silence more than in his words. A quiet moment settled between them, full of unspoken questions. Then thunder rolled across the ocean, low and distant. Arvid rose. "The storm will reach us within the hour. You must stay warm. When the waves rise, the deck will be too dangerous." Lisa's breath caught, fear flickering through her eyes. "Storms, I do not endure them well." That, more than anything, hinted at a deeper past. Arvid extended a hand, not commanding, not hesitant, simply offering. For a long second, she stared at it, uncertainty battling the instinct to accept. At last, she placed her cold fingers in his, letting him help her rise. Her legs nearly buckled, but Arvid remained steady, guiding her toward the sheltered space beneath the central beam where the warmth from the heated stones lingered. The crew noticed. Some exchanged curious glances. Others muttered under their breath. Arvid's stare silenced them instantly. When Lisa eased down against the wooden wall, Arvid arranged the furs around her again. She watched him with an expression he couldn't name, gentle, curious, almost questioning. "You guard your crew with great care," she said softly. "My crew," he replied, "and all in my keeping." Her breath slowed. "Then perhaps the sea showed me mercy." Arvid looked away, feeling the shift of something he hadn't allowed in years. A sudden gust hit the ship, followed by a swell of water that rocked the entire hull. The men tightened the ropes, anchoring the mast and bracing for the storm's arrival. Arvid glanced up at the sky. "It begins." Lisa's fingers gripped the fur. With a tremor, she tried to hide. The fear in her eyes was subtle, but he saw it clearly. He knelt beside her, his tone firm but steady. "The longship is built for storms. Trust the waves. They will fight us, but they will not claim us." "How can you be so certain?" she asked. "Because I will not allow it." Her gaze softened at his conviction, but the ship's shuddering made her shoulders tense again. Arvid removed his cloak and placed it over her, without a word. Lisa inhaled sharply, as though the warmth and unexpected gentleness reached deeper than the fabric itself. "You should keep this," she murmured. "I do not need it," he replied, which was only half a lie. He needed nothing more than knowing she wasn't trembling anymore. The storm shifted from warning to arrival. Wind howled across the deck, waves slamming the hull with steady force. The crew fought the elements with practiced movements, relying on sheer discipline to keep the ship steady. Lisa watched in awe and fear. "Is there anything I can do to help?" she asked. Arvid shook his head. "Rest. Your strength will serve you later." She hesitated. "And if the sea grows crueler?" "Then I will stay near," he said simply. The admission settled between them like a vow. As the wind roared, Arvid positioned himself beside her, one hand braced on a wooden beam, the other steadying the furs as the ship lurched again. His presence formed a calm barrier against the chaos around them. Lisa exhaled slowly, as if his nearness anchored her. "Thank you," she whispered. Arvid glanced down, his voice low. "You are safe, Lisa. No storm will take you from my deck." Outside, the sea raged. Inside, something fragile and unnamed began to root itself. Quiet at first, but undeniable. It was the beginning of a connection neither of them had been searching for, yet neither could now avoid. The storm raged through most of the night, but dawn arrived with a pale, reluctant light spreading across the sea. The waves calmed slowly, as if exhausted from their own fury, leaving the longship drifting on quieter waters. Frost clung to the railings, shimmering like scattered silver. The crew exhaled with relief, though fatigue lined their faces. Arvid stood at the bow, eyes fixed on the horizon. The storm had passed, yes, but the presence of the woman he rescued had brought a different kind of turbulence to the ship, one he couldn't chart or command. He felt it in how his men whispered among themselves, and in the weight of his own attention, which drifted toward her even when he tried to focus on the sea. Behind him, Lisa stirred under the furs, slowly waking. She pushed herself upright, wincing at the soreness gathering in her limbs. Her gaze wandered across the deck, taking in the aftermath, the ropes stiff with frost, the tired crew, and Arvid's broad figure outlined against the morning sky. She watched him longer than she meant to. Something about his stillness felt protective and unsettling, as though standing too close to him could shift the course of her life without warning. Aren approached her cautiously. "You survived your first storm with us," he said, attempting a smile. Lisa managed a faint one in return. "Survived, yes. Gracefully? I doubt it." "Few do," Aren admitted. "But you handled it better than some of our men during their first voyage." Before Lisa could respond, Arvid turned. His gaze landed on her instantly, as if it felt her wake rather than seen it. He walked toward her with the heavy, steady steps of someone accustomed to command, though his eyes held a softness reserved only for her. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Tired." "And grateful," she replied. "Truly." Arvid studied her carefully, checking for signs of hidden weakness. "You should try to stand today. Your strength will not return if you remain still." Lisa nodded. Arvid extended a hand, and she accepted it, rising slowly. The deck tilted ever so slightly beneath her, and her balance faltered. Arvid caught her with ease, his arm firm around her waist. The contact sent a quiet rush of heat through her, something warm enough to rival the heated stones they had used to save her life. She stepped away once steady, though the absence of his touch left an unexpected hollow in her chest. "I can manage," she said softly. "I know," Arvid replied, "but it is my duty to ensure you do." Lisa opened her mouth, perhaps to thank him again, but her gaze drifted toward a cluster of crew members watching them with suspicion. Their expressions were curt, guarded. She lowered her voice. "Your men think I bring trouble." Arvid followed her glance, but showed no emotion. "They think anything unfamiliar brings trouble. You do not." "You don't know that," she whispered. He met her eyes steadily. "I know enough." Before she could respond, a sharp call came from the stern. One of the men had found something wedged between the planks near the waterline, a small piece of broken wood, dark and worn, with a symbol carved into it. Arvid walked over with Lisa close behind. The carving was simple but unmistakable, a twisted shape resembling intertwined branches, marked by sharp lines. The sight hardened Arvid's expression. "Is it dangerous?" Aren asked. Arvid didn't answer immediately. He traced the symbol with one gloved thumb. The cold would rough beneath his touch. Lisa's breath hitched. That symbol, I've seen it before." Arvid turned to her. "Where?" Her eyes darkened with memory, though it was unclear whether she feared what she recalled or feared saying it aloud. "On the ship that followed mine, before the waves took us." A low murmur passed through the crew. A stranger was one concern, but a stranger connected to a threat? That was something different. Arvid's voice remained steady, but his posture sharpened. "Tell me everything." Lisa hesitated. Even speaking felt like pulling against a tide of old fear. "I left the coast 2 days before you found me. I was fleeing people. I cannot speak their names." "Not yet." Her fingers dug into her palms. "But that symbol was painted on their sails." Arvid's jaw tightened. "Did they pursue you?" "Yes," she whispered. "I thought a smaller boat would hide me, but the storm came before they could reach me. The sea broke my vessel. The rest, I don't remember clearly, only cold and fear." Arvid turned the piece of wood over in his hand. "If they followed you into the storm, their ships may not be far." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Aren stepped closer to Arvid. "Jarl, if she was fleeing danger, and that danger now follows her." "She is under my protection," Arvid said before Aren could finish. "And so long as she is on my deck, no harm will reach her." Lisa looked away, her chest tightening at the fierce certainty in his voice. No one had ever spoken for her like that, not with such calm strength. It was both comforting and frightening, because she knew what dangers lay behind her and how ruthless her pursuers could be. Still, Arvid's presence made her feel seen in a way she had not felt in years. He handed the piece of wood to Aren. "Keep watch. If there is another ship on the horizon, I want to know before the sun is high." The crew dispersed with renewed urgency. Arvid remained with Lisa, his voice lower. "Your past has found you, Lisa, but you are not facing it alone. I did not want to bring danger to your crew, she murmured. Danger finds us all sooner or later. What matters is how we face it. A gust of wind caught her hair, and she pushed it behind her ear. You speak as though you've known many storms. Arvid's expression shifted, softening for a heartbeat, then closing off again. More than I wished for. Lisa sensed the truth in his voice, but she didn't press him. They both carried wounds the sea had not washed clean. As morning light strengthened, Arvid led her to the stern, showing her how the crew charted their route. She listened, absorbing his calm certainty, feeling herself drawn to his steadiness as the ship moved forward to the cold quiet. Their hands brushed once, accidentally, barely a second, and the small contact felt like the turning of a page neither of them had expected. For the first time since waking on the longship, Lisa allowed herself to breathe without fear knotting in her throat. But far behind them, beyond the soft sky and rolling waves, a dark shape briefly broke the horizon before disappearing again. The danger she fled was not gone. It was searching, and it was getting closer. The sun sagged low over a fractured horizon, bleeding a coppery hue across the battlefield that had once been nothing more than an abandoned ridge on the outskirts of Forgotten Valley. Now it resembled a graveyard made of steel, shattered earth, and the lingering echoes of desperation. Captain Hale stood at the crest of the ridge, boots planted firmly on the dust, shoulders square though exhaustion pressed against him like an invisible hand. His uniform was torn, his knuckles scraped, and his breath carried the rasp of a man who had survived what should have killed him twice over. But his focus stayed locked on the figure walking toward him, Commander Rourke, flanked by two loyalists who looked as though they expected ambushes to erupt from the stones. Rourke's posture was stiff, proud even now, despite the bruises blooming across his jaw and the dry blood matted at his collar. His eyes, however, held something new, uncertainty, perhaps even regret, though Hale refused to trust that at face value. The commander stopped several feet away, the silence stretching long enough for the wind to thread between them like a warning. "It didn't have to come to this," Rourke said, though the words sounded hollow, forced. Hale met his gaze with a steadiness sharpened by the last 24 hours. "You're right. It didn't. But you made your choice." Rourke looked out across the plain where the remnants of his faction were held under guard, surrounded by Hale's remaining operatives. "You think you understand what I've done," he murmured. "But you don't." Hale didn't flinch. "You endanger civilians, sabotaged command authority, and nearly triggered an international breach that could have cost thousands of lives. I understand that perfectly." A muscle jumped along Rourke's jaw. "You don't see the bigger picture." "I see enough." The exchange might have spiraled into something sharper, if not for the quiet crackle of the comms unit strapped to Hale's wrist. He tapped it, maintaining eye contact with Rourke. "Speak." Lucille's voice came through, brittle with strain but intact. "We found the last cache. Just like you guessed. It was buried under the old telecom tower." She exhaled sharply, the sound scratchy as though she were sitting in a cloud of smoke. "It's a mess out here, Hale, but we've secured everything. No detonators. No more surprises. Good. Bring your team back. We finish this now." "Copy." Hale ended the connection, lowering his arm with the slow precision of a man piecing together the right words. But before he spoke, one of Rourke's guards shifted. Hale's operatives tensed. The air seemed to crystallize. Rourke raised a hand. "Stand down, Sergeant." The guard froze in place. Rourke turned back to Hale with a peculiar weariness, softening his expression. "You've won the field," he admitted. "But winning doesn't mean understanding." Hale didn't bother responding. Understanding was irrelevant now. Duty was not. Behind Rourke, the wind picked up, carrying a scatter of dust and the faint clatter of loose metal from the wrecked transport vehicle below the ridge. On the far end of the valley, the medical crew continued sorting wounded from fallen with mechanical efficiency, a grim rhythm that marked the closing of any battle. When Hale finally spoke again, his tone was level, almost flat. "You'll be escorted to headquarters for formal charges. You'll have the chance to explain yourself there." Rourke's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not quite a snarl. "Explain myself? To who?" He shook his head. "They'll call me a traitor before I open my mouth." "They'll call you what your actions merit," Hale replied. The truth will sort the rest. Rourke went silent, though something flickered in his eyes, like the last spark of fire that refused to die. But he didn't resist when two of Hale's men approached, securing his wrists with restraint cuffs. As they led him away, Rourke glanced back only once, and Hale read something in that look he could not fully decipher. Anger, maybe, or something colder. By the time Lucia appeared over the ridge, her uniform streaked with ash and her hair pulled back in a rough knot, the last rays of sunlight were dissolving into violet dusk. She trudged toward Hale, her steps heavy but purposeful. "That's the final charge disarmed," she reported. "We swept the area twice. The intel was dead on." Hale nodded, though relief came slow and muted. "You okay?" She huffed a tired half-laugh. "Ask me in a week, when I've slept longer than 30 minutes. A faint smile tugged at Hale's mouth. "Fair enough." Lucia scanned the field below. "Is it over?" "For now," Hale answered. She caught the tone and frowned. "You're thinking about what he said." "He's hiding something," Hale admitted. "Something he still thinks justifies everything." "Do you think he's right?" Hale shook his head. "I think he believes he is. That's usually the most dangerous kind of wrong." Lucia swallowed, letting her gaze drift to the detained mutineers. "We should get back. Debrief will be hell." "Yeah," Hale murmured. "I'll join you in a minute." She clasped his shoulder once before heading down the slope. Hale remained where he stood, letting the wind brush across him like a cold hand. The battlefield stretched outward, a tapestry of broken metal, churned dirt, and flickering medical lights. Yet inside that devastation lay something painfully clear. This conflict hadn't ended with Rourke's capture. It had only peeled back the first layer of a deeper fracture, one Hale suspected would test him far more than today's violence. Behind him, footsteps crunched lightly. He turned to see Corporal Danvers approaching, carrying a sealed data case. "Sir," Danvers said, off in the container, "we found this under the commander's personal field kit. It wasn't logged." Hale took the case, its weight surprising him. Cold metal. No visible markings except a single etched symbol near the hinge, a coded identifier used only for covert intelligence transfers. His pulse quickened. Where exactly was this? Hale asked. "Inside a false compartment in his pack. Looks important." Hale opened his mouth to reply, then stopped abruptly as a low rumble rolled across the valley. Not thunder, not machinery. An explosion, distant but unmistakable. Echoed through the air, lighting the far-off ridge with a brief, violent bloom of orange. Danvers spun toward the direction, panic flickering across his face. "What the—" "Sir, we cleared everything." "No." Hale cut in, voice sharpening. "We cleared everything here." Danvers blanched. "You think?" "Yes." Hale tightened his grip on the data case. Rourke's last look suddenly made sense. This wasn't over. Not remotely. And whatever came next was already unfolding.